Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the Michael Sisco Show. I am your host, Michael Sisco. We have a very special guest today, Radix Verum. We're going to be talking about QAnon. Okay. Welcome to the show, Radix. While I set up super chats and such, just in case some of my fans are not familiar with you, could you give a quick introduction and kind of what you do over there at Patriot Soap Box?
Yeah, it's a 24-hour network, which is pretty crazy. We've been live 24/7 since, I think, January of 2018. So it's wild. And I have my show, Digging Deeper, Monday through Friday from 7 to 9 p.m. Eastern. So 5 days a week, I do my show. But, we've got different hosts coming in. The shows are typically broken up into like 2-hour time slots, and that runs continuously all day and all night. And so I also write articles and stuff for our website, and just citizen journalism.
Nice. I don't know how you do it. I can barely keep up with once a week. So
it's hard, and managing like something like that with like 40 different show hosts and everybody's schedules, it's not easy to do. It's pretty much a full-time job.
Yeah, that's crazy. I know. What is the I guess what kind of audience do you go for with the page with the channel? Is it?
Well, we have a pretty like diverse audience. It's obviously marketed for people who are patriots, kind of American nationalists, but we have a lot of Christians on our channel. And because it's just a place where regular people can learn how to host a show, can come on and have like a place for their voice to be heard, it attracts different people. It's people who want to be able to do that and have it be easy. They just like pop in and pop out. Things are provided for them. We put them through training and stuff and teach them how to use this stuff. So we have all kinds of different people. We have people from like the Tea Party. We have older people, some younger people. It's just like random. But cool. Typically people just, like you and me.
Now, do we like if let's say somebody watching here, if they were to decide to host a show on your channel, would they automatically be on a terror watch list? Is that
possibly? I'm not sure I'm on a terror watch list, but I will say that the media has labeled my family specifically like behind QAnon. And so they sort of latched on to that, and probably because we were a 24-hour channel that started as like a group of people in on the chans and stuff that were just researching the posts and the Q posts and stuff, but we were like talking about other stuff too. So we decided to put like our Discord server to just like broadcast it on YouTube, and that's how it was initially. Nobody was like on camera. Everybody just had like an internet handle, and we were just like in a Discord chat and just broadcasting that, and people just loved that. They would be able to hop in the Discord and just start talking, and I guess they liked it. And it just kind of took off because this was before YouTube censorship got really bad. And so they just like, the media hated us and started like saying that, my husband was Q and all this other nonsense because he was a board owner, but they're so dumb. I mean, they don't even know how like any of the chans work. They're like, oh, he posts with the Q screen name, and it's like, there's no screen names on the chans. That's not how any of that works. There's a trip code that, is put in which can act as like a password, but there's no screen name that people can post with or whatever. It's just like, it's kind of funny though, like looking at mainstream media people trying to explain the chans to people. And of course, you know how the chans are, 4chan and 8chan, they can be very politically incorrect. So yeah, they've put all these hit pieces out about our channel, and they call it like a Q channel, even though Q is hardly ever talked about. If like a post comes out, we'll like cover it and we'll be like, oh, okay, can we verify this with information that is out there in open source? Yes or no? It's not like we sit there and like do these esoteric readings of them or anything like that. It's mostly just people talking, having guests on, and just talking about the news. That's pretty much it. But they still call it like a Q channel. And West Point Academy Counter Terror Center has named our family next to Al Qaeda.
Yeah, they called me a QAnon site, and I've never even talked about. I've never mentioned QAnon.
That's how you know it's just like a pejorative now, like conspiracy theorist, far right, white supremacist, QAnon. That it's just like a slur now for them.
Yeah, I've never even really, you know me, I've never been big on it anyhow.
Yeah.
I've always been pretty critical of it. I mean,
which I think is important. There are a lot of people that just like riff off of it, and then there's a lot of people that just like read stuff into it that isn't there. And in the early days on the boards, it wasn't like that because everybody was anonymous, and when things would come out, nobody just like ran with it and believed it. People would try to disprove it and stuff, and it was just not like, it wasn't accepted that this was a legitimate source, or oh, trust the government or somebody in the military to tell you the truth or something like that. It wasn't like that, but as more people started following it, that changed, I guess, or the way that people thought about it. But I think like the people who were there from the beginning, who were watching it like from day one, they're some of the most critical people still about it, like thinking it, questioning whether or not it was in fact a military run psyop, right? Which is definitely possible to discredit like patriots or whatever, because there were a lot of people who would just like say things were going to happen on certain days that never happened, and like all this other weird stuff with JFK Jr. or whatever. I think that's still going on. It's bizarre, but you know, it's, yeah, the people that were there from the beginning are still, I think, the most critical of it now, and kind of want to know, what was it? Is it like Cambridge Analytica, micro-targeted psychological operations? Because it certainly does seem to be some type of military-grade communications thing. Whatever it was that was happening there, it certainly it wasn't anything like Meganon, FBI Anon, or some of the other things that we saw on the chans before Q.
Yeah, well, I mean, it definitely had all the elements of a pretty good deception too. Like if you have to sprinkle in a little bit of truth and then ambiguity and whatnot. So, but anyways, not the subject of the show.
Right.
But maybe potentially it could be related in a certain sense, because you wrote a piece called, I think, Dialectic Technocratique. Is that what it was called?
Yeah.
And I thought it was really good. It was quite lengthy, but I think anyone watching, I probably should have posted the link, but maybe I'll do that in the chats when we finish. Good read. But before we get too much into the weeds of it, the Relentless Revolution, I think is what it was called. So what is, I guess let's see if we can identify who is this ruling class and what is its relationship to the neoliberal globalist order?
Yeah, the ruling class, as I see it, is sort of the hidden hand, right? It's the same people who've been running things behind the scenes for a long time. You could maybe identify this as the same people that are involved in like the occult, in secret societies, or the old mystery religions, right? It is the ruling class, but you probably don't know their names. You know, they're behind the scenes, but these are the people that sort of run the world. And right now, the iteration of that is the U.S. empire, which is right now a neoliberal globalist empire.
Yeah, and well, one thing I think a lot of people will, like, when they hear elite, they think just rich, but I don't think. But like, for instance, like Donald Trump was never part of this club, for instance, but he's obscenely wealthy, but he's not accepted in these elite
Right.
circles. Um, so I do have some experience in this world as an occultist, and there was the whole like I was aware of the Washington Monument being an obelisk.
Yeah.
And it's basically like a monument to asking for the blessings of Athena. um, and so I was kind of aware of this. I wouldn't say that I was like, well, I wasn't Freemason, so
You were
I
a
don't.
Freemason?
Yeah, yeah,
What?
yeah,
Oh
yeah.
no.
I quit to become Orthodox, basically, because they're
Wow.
not compatible at all. So
No, no.
yeah.
Certainly not.
um, so yeah, so I just kind of wanted to make that distinction for the audience there, that elite is not rich people. It's this actual cabal of occultists who
Right.
are trying to essentially rule the world through the American empire.
Yeah, and it's not really about wealth. I mean, obviously these people have money, but they're more interested in power. Is they don't care about money. They have probably more than they need, but yeah, they're more interested in power, in my opinion. And it won't be anybody who's out there like Donald Trump that you would know.
Yeah,
Certainly not. That would that would be that would kind of like go against the whole idea of what the occult is, and why it's kept secret. They don't want their names out there. They don't want people to know that this is like the hidden power behind not just the U.S. empire, but others as well.
yeah. Well, on the same note, they're also pretty open about it. Like, I mean, half of what like people like Jay Dyer do is they read their books. They read,
Yeah.
but it's like they gaslight very well. So they'll write what they want to do. They'll put it out there. But then if you're in opposition to them and you mention it, you point it out, then they'll gaslight you and say that you're crazy. But then,
Yeah, and that may be part of it, right? Like putting it out there, that I think is part of some their belief system in some way, that if they put this out there in some form and nobody really stops them, they're not they're not really responsible, right? Then the impetus is on you. You know what I mean? You're tacitly approving because
yeah,
it is sort of out there. You know, it like H.G. Wells. H.G. Wells was obviously somebody who was a spokesperson for this. He put out his books, and The Open Conspiracy, World Brain. It's all out there if you go and read it. So
yeah, like the Great Reset stuff. Klaus Schwab has written like 3 books on it, and but if you bring it up, you're crazy. You're crazy.
yeah,
Um, Alex Y says, so the world is run by Freemasons. I wouldn't be that narrow with it. It's they're definitely involved, but it's a bigger
I
I'd say like a communion of occultists. You have Rosicrucians, you have Illuminati, you have other groups. It's just like they all have the same worldview, and they kind of,
yeah, I call it the Black Order. That's
yeah,
yeah,
and
my
they
word
all
for it.
have like ties to each other, but they're not all like officially in the same org. Does that make
No, and
sense?
sometimes they have competing interests and stuff. It's not like totally monolithic, but for the most part, they agree on the difference between them and us.
Yeah, yeah. They don't like Jesus. They don't like Christ. Or really they don't like anything that's transcendent of any sort beyond what they believe. So,
Mhm.
Church of Entropy, very honored to have you in the chats today. It's been a while. It's been a long time since I've been on your stream. Um, but welcome everybody in the chats. Radix is used to having a bit of a bigger audience. She has like 3,000 at once, but on this afternoon day, we have about 15 right now. So, but that's cool. I'm experimenting with new show times to kind of see what works.
Yeah, so. Early is new for me. I was doing my exercises this morning. They're horrible. I've been doing the high intensity interval training, which is like 15 minutes of hell. And so I'm still kind of tired from that. But yeah, I actually kind of like being on earlier in the day because I feel like my brain is still not foggy, you know. Yeah. After my show at like 9, I'm just like, ooh. You know, I just want to just like relax. Yeah. My brain is like mush because I just like, I don't know, I do a lot of like show prep and stuff and probably overkill, and I'm always like researching like many things. And I read like 5 books at a time, and it's just hard to focus on one thing.
Yeah. No, I know how, like when I get interviewed on other shows, I tend to prep more than I do for my own show.
And you prep more than I do for your interviews, at least.
Well, I like to have my guests prepared because then it makes for a better show. So I like, you know, I prep my guests and then they're good, and then, you know, it's nothing worse than having a guest. You ask a question and they're just stumbling and they suck. You know?
I kind of just like let them talk. You know, I feel like I'm a horrible interviewer because I'm sort of like socially autistic, so I will just like talk and talk and talk. My gosh, it's horrible. I have to like be aware of that.
Talkative guests are good guests. That's a good guess there.
But they're not good interviewers.
Well, yeah. I mean, they're both different skills. Like,
yeah.
I'm probably better as well, I don't know. I've gotten good at both, but I started out only good at interviewing, and then I had to, you know, as people wanted me on their shows and whatnot, and getting in politics, I had to improve quite a bit. Alex Y says, who are those people? Where do they gather in some dark room? They do have rituals. A lot of them. They have like very strange rituals.
Yeah. Who knows where they gather? I mean, obviously that's not publicized. You could make the argument that, like, you know, Alex Jones went into Bohemian Grove and got some of their weirdness on camera, but I wonder how much of that was like, you know, how much that was organic. What if that was sort of like a just planted out there, right? To kind of make people think like, oh, we really caught them. You know, they're burning an effigy. Like, that's the worst they do. Yeah, right. No, I mean, you're not going to know where they gather or who they are. That's the whole point of it. But you can trace the threads of what they're doing. I think that's obvious, and I think you can tell that it's the same people using the same tactics, right? You can follow that all the way back like 6,000 years.
Yeah, well, I know that when I was a Freemason, I was aware that a lot of the misinformation about Freemasonry, we actually put out ourselves. It's kind of like a cloak and dagger type thing. So
right, exactly.
Yeah. But like I've stated before on my show and in other places, you know, that the problem isn't that we have elites. Like, every society is going to have them, right? And they play generally a good function sometimes. The problem with our elites is that they are anti-Christian. And I know others like Jay Dyer, they've highlighted their occultism. Can you kind of explain their use of what you described as the occult technique of social alchemy?
Yeah, so social alchemy is sort of a corporate application of it, believe it or not. That sounds kind of silly, but when we're looking at who a lot of these people are now, it's sort of like the managers, right? The managerial class, the scientific establishment, but their social alchemy is just taking like old alchemical techniques and applying them in a corporate manner. So they have this little graph where they explain what this is, and they actually like openly put that out there. They're kind of proud of this, where they talk about like innovate, improve, scale, and disseminate, right? It's this little thing, this little graph, and they have these little things where it goes back and forth. So it's innovate, improve, impact, and scale. So innovate, they come up with their idea, their hypothesis, and then they'll try to put it out there, right? To prove its impact, or how does this work? They do this on the societal scale through their like mass marketing. And then if they feel like they need to change it, they pivot back to innovate, and they come up with other things, and then they put it out there again. And then they test this. They do these little test cases. They see its effect, and then they disseminate it by scaling it up or down. So that's what it is. It's in a way social engineering.
Let's see. So how is that like a? How do we? Well, maybe that we should talk about that later. let's skip down. Can you give us a brief one part I liked about your piece was you were going into Bertrand Russell's vision of like scientism and how he would apply that to government completely regulating everyone's perception, like and then that nobody would basically know how their convictions were even how they even came to those. Can you kind of get into that a little? Give us a little history lesson.
Yeah, so Bertrand Russell was like a philosopher, British philosopher, social critic, and he obviously came from one of these establishment families. So he, like H.G. Wells, was one of the people that they tasked with propagating or seeding certain ideas out there into the collective conscious, if you will. And he was part of this like CIA funded group, like front group, right? That was all about destroying America and Europe's culture, right? And he's also a member of the Coefficients Club with H.G. Wells, to give you an idea of who he is and the kind of people that he was running with, right? So his idea, he put out a book, The Impact of Science on Society, and he talked about what a scientific dictatorship would look like. And like you said, it's like total regulation of everything, and it's using mass psychology to control society. And he said that would be like the most important thing for any regime. If you wanted to control people, that you would need to have a control of like the education of their kids. If you can, educate one generation from the time they're young all the way to the time they're older, you can use these psychological techniques combined with scientific techniques. I think he said something like injunction, and something else, right? So it's a combination of controlling their diets, putting chemicals in their foods, using these brainwashing techniques on them that are, of course, scientifically created. But the way that I see it is a lot of that stuff isn't really new per se. These are old occult ideas. It's the same kind of thing. And we'll get into that later on when we talk about the Hegelian dialectic and stuff like that, because that's also the same thing. But yeah, he was saying that if we get them when they're young, we can, use these different things on them to get them to believe that snow is black. And also make it so that they could never act in a way that their instructors, the educators didn't want them to for the rest of their lives. It's like psychologically crippling people, and they don't, understand how their convictions are created. And we could see that in the modern world with something like Cambridge Analytica. It's the same thing. Cambridge Analytica uses data analytics and micro-targeting and military-grade psychological warfare to do the same thing to people, to make them think that they are coming to ideas organically when they are not. You could look at Brexit. That was one of the campaigns Cambridge Analytica was part of. Donald Trump's campaign. Cambridge Analytica was testing the phrases like drain the swamp and like lock her up. in 2014, before Trump even announced he was running. And if you think about, like, drain the swamp, it's bump, 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 hope and change. They did this with Obama as well. So the people who were behind the rise of Obama are the same people who were helping Trump's campaign.
Yeah, and I mean, that's not even like, I mean, because obviously I work in politics, and so to a degree, I would be involved in similar tactics. I mean, I'm not gonna lie. Like, I use data,
Right.
I analyze it, I have an insane amount of data that is kind of creepy, and I may or may not be using advanced techniques with technology that the FBI uses pretty soon for myself. But I mean, the difference that I see, for instance, like what Cambridge Analytica did. I mean, it is pretty sophisticated
Yeah,
stuff here. But
right.
I mean, there's also, if you're, I guess the question is, I mean, and that's also like basic.
Well, this is
sales.
how they're run now. Yeah, these are how campaigns are run now. I mean, that's just a fact. They're all run this way. And so if you're going to be campaigning against somebody that is using micro-targeted data analytics, you're going to have to use the same thing, or you're not going to be able to beat them. So that's unfortunately the way things run now. Their parent company, SCL Group, had basically like a British import control license with the British government for a military grade psychological warfare weapons. So that's what these are. They're military grade tools, and other companies don't have access to the same ones. So, but I mean, it's military psychological operations tools. But it's not the same thing as what Bertrand Russell wanted. I mean, he wanted total scientific regulation. He wanted people to be sterilized. He wanted controlled breeding, and things like that. And well, the way that he saw that was that the ruling class, the ruling elites, would be using selective breeding and genetic modification, genetic manipulation to enhance themselves, right? So that gradually over time, the people who were wealthy and had access to these things like genetic modification, that were doing selected breeding, right? It's not like they marry for love or anything like that. No, they have reasons for this stuff, and the regular people don't. So he thought the gap between the plebs, as he called us, and the rulers would become so great that any idea that there would be like an organized revolt, he compared that to like sheep organizing a revolt over eating mutton against their, farm owners. So they see us as like animals on a farm and themselves as the farmers.
Fascinating. Yeah, that's. I mean, like the whole. I know Alex Y in the chat. He was asking. So are we talking about like demonic forces or neoliberal world order? I think they're pretty much the same.
Yeah.
And I know that there's variances within like different occult ideologies and a lot of overlap. But I do think that in essence they have a more very, I don't even want to say materialistic. It's like it's almost the opposite problem. It's like very Gnostic in a sense that they, because like as Christians we view material as kind of justified through Christ's incarnation, right?
Right.
So we don't believe that we're like just souls trapped in a body. But these people, because they do kind of believe that, they do regard, they don't give much regard to our biological life. Like none of that's like a deal to them. So that might kind of explain how they can rationalize such a kind of cruel in a sense look at us as like animals, because we can just be reincarnated, right? So like our spirit lives on, and it's not the same thing to them. So yeah, they certainly have a different outlook, which may explain some of their why they can still think they're the good guys and hold these views.
Yeah, self-deception, right? And I also like, I don't know, some of them, like probably the managerial class, do believe that they are somehow noble or doing something good. But I don't think that the people that are really in control of things, I don't think they think that. I'm pretty sure they know better. They just don't care. They see themselves as like the rightful rulers of society, and you can look at like people like Francis Bacon, who wrote The New Atlantis. They saw democracy as a way of like spreading occultism. So the neoliberal ideology it goes back to that. Manly P. Hall wrote about that. That they saw America as their shining beacon, right? They would make it this democratic society that would be the shining city on a hill that everybody would want to emulate. And in a way, we kind of do see that, where everybody is sort of adopting their neoliberal globalist ideology. And they sell it using like humanitarianism and things like that, but that's certainly not what it is at all. And even if it is, in some cases, that doesn't mean it's right just because you think you're doing something good or right, and you think that what you're doing is justified because you think you know best. That's ignorance and pride, and the road to hell is paved with good intentions.
Yeah, no, it's always masked behind philanthropy, right? We have George Soros and Bill Gates doing that. So
I call them full-on rapists.
You did.
Yeah.
You compared this to rape, basically.
I did. Yeah, it is. It's like psychological rape. I mean, Bertrand Russell said he wanted to like remove people's free will that God gave them. That's sick. And it is rape in a way when somebody is manipulating you psychologically and you don't know you're being manipulated, and then you go do the things that they want you to do. You're being controlled. In a way too, they can get you to be sexually promiscuous, to dress a certain way. They are kind of like raping you. They're raping your mind for sure.
Yeah, we're probably getting because we're using the R word. John Pro says we're using the R word. I don't personally care. We're also on Trovo and Bitwave, so I don't care. Most of my videos are demonetized anyways. So, but one way that you can help is you can send super chats, especially through Entropy, which is the preferred method. And you can find the link in the description. And the biggest giver today gets to come on the show next week. So,
oh, that's cool.
Well, yeah. And I'm also, while we're talking housekeeping, I will be doing, I'm going to start trying to do a show twice a week again, but the second show is going to be, while it's going to be live stream, it's not going to be kept on YouTube. The replay is going to be on the Patreon. So, but anyways, could you kind of dive into, well, I was going to talk about the R word a little bit, but maybe we shouldn't. Well, because I was gonna mention that like it's not even really a physical thing that a rapist is going for. It's really just spiritual. Like it's the imposition of power and control over the other person, which is why
it's spiritual as well. It's a spiritual attack.
Yeah.
And it's really trying to damage somebody's soul.
Yeah. I'm just wanted to kind of the motivation behind it isn't like to satiate lust. It's normally for power, control, domination over, and which is why like after almost every war, even in World War II, you know, millions of German women were raped by the United States, the British, and the Soviets. Nobody likes to talk
Soviets.
about that.
Yeah,
and
from
nobody
8 to
cared.
80 years old. 8
it was
years old to 80.
Actually, it was encouraged. It wasn't even discouraged, but
Yeah.
it's like, you're a hero. Here you go. Bam.
Yeah,
So,
Ilya Ehrenberg, the Soviet propaganda czar, would drop these leaflets down on the Red Army that like said, you know, break their racial pride, rape their women, like just really encouraged it. He was a demon, Ilya Ehrenberg. Good lord.
yeah,
He
it's
was.
insane. Yep. But anyways, I can't keep up with the live chats. People are there. But we do have a Entropy $25 from John Pro. It says, keep up the great work, brother Sisco. Thank you. So just shoot me a message, John, if you want to come on next week. You don't have to, but hit me up on Telegram at Michael Sisco. It's my personal one. But Alex says that's a Russophobic hoax. No, that's actually pretty pretty true, bro. That's a historical
real
fact, my friend.
Yeah, the Bolsheviks.
Yeah, acknowledging the wrongs of the Soviet Union is not equivalent to like hating Russia now. Like,
right.
but people are retarded when they think that the two are the same. Like, Russia now is not the Soviet Union, and then the Tsarist history is not the same as the Soviet. The Soviets were the enemy from within. So I hope most people can understand that.
Yeah, look what they did to the Tsar's family. I mean, geez.
Yeah. I don't think acknowledging the horrors of the Soviet Union is Russophobic, bro. So just not true. Anyways, could you kind of get into, because I know I don't know if you know, Dissident Mama actually wrote a response to one of the hit pieces on me, and she actually broke down the Hegelian dialectic, kind of explaining the subversiveness that some of the subversiveness that's being used against the Orthodox Church by some leftists over there at Orthodoxy and Dialogue. But who I'm their new pet obsession. So
oh my gosh.
Yeah.
You're so weird.
I know. Just wait till they find out what I'm about to announce in a couple of weeks. I've hinted at it, but I haven't really made it official.
Has load over there. Yeah.
But anyways, could you kind of dive into that? What is it? What is the Hegelian dialectic? And maybe you could talk about him a little bit. Like, why was he so... I know Karl Marx kind of appealed to him a bit, but they also had some differences. And even people like, I know Richard Spencer, of all people, considers himself a kind of a student of this guy. I don't know if you know anything, but maybe you could talk about Hegel and what his dialectic is.
Yeah. Again, this is not like, it wasn't really his ideas. He got them from like Immanuel Kant and Jakob Böhme, who was actually a Christian mystic, but he obviously was not, he wouldn't have orthodox beliefs. He was probably, I guess you could say, a heretic. And he put forward, the idea of dialectics of how, his explanation of how God works, where he thinks that God is like, separated his consciousness so that he can experience the material world. And that's why we have free will. And, it's so that God can experience himself. And so he explained like the way that he thought the universe worked and how God worked was a process of dialectics. That's how he saw it, of how God was gradually experiencing himself, if that makes sense. And so, he put that out in like the 1600s. Immanuel Kant, he, I think, was like 17th century. And so Hegel obviously read Böhme, clearly was very influenced by him. And so the dialectic is just a thesis, antithesis, and then synthesis, or problem, reaction, solution. That's one way of wording it, but Trotsky saw dialectics as a way to induce a revolution, or to create what he called the permanent revolution, because it's a continual process. When you look at like logic, they don't think like that there is anything as like absolute truth, and they don't think that there's anything as absolute history. They say that history can be changed. It's a continual process, and that it's ever changing depending on the zeitgeist of the moment. So the dominant cultural milieu, right? And so that's how Hegel looked at it. And then Lenin read Hegel, obviously, and he started incorporating that into the publications of the Soviets, and he wanted it to be, materialist, so materialist dialectics. And that's it really is sick, because if you think about how they think, if there's no absolute truth, then good can be good, and you can justify horrible things, for the sake of like progress, right?
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think that's that actually comes down to the main divide between the so-called right and the so-called left, right? Like one side appeals to, well, aside from ignoring the fact that there's no such thing as a American right wing at the moment. Well, there's a budding one, but not not in the mainstream. Certainly not in the gatekeepers of the Republican Party. But there is, the appeal to absolute truth and an absolute reality versus all of that being fluid, right? That's what progressivism is. And for them, their morality shifts based really power ultimately. But can we stop arguing about Nazis and Soviet Unions in the chat?
Yeah.
I mean, I'm serious. If you bring up Nazi again or Soviets, we're just gonna kick you out. So
yeah, that's not even really like the main crux of what we're talking about here. These are iterations of it. As far as that goes, I mean, I just think that the way that the Soviets applied dialectics is something that the left is still doing today. The whole point of it is to keep people in a state of like reacting to things, right? Because you're constantly, it never ends. There's always the synthesis that you're going to need again to make the thesis. Then you're going to come up with an antithesis and another synthesis, and so it keeps going. That's the whole point of it. It never ends. It never ends. This is like, you can think about it as, first we have to accept gays. Then we have to accept gay marriage. Then we have to accept that, bake the cake bigot. Then 72 genders. And so there's no end to this. It just keeps going, and it keeps people in this sort of reactionary response to what they're doing. And you're never going on offense. You're constantly reacting to what they're doing, and that is the goal of it.
Yeah. And it's always I've talked about this too. It's always, every revolutionary step is always for more freedom. But then
right.
at the end of it, it's always less freedom and more intrusiveness.
Yeah, more consolidation of power and control, wealth, power into the hands of the few at the top.
Yeah. Hey, Pano, I made you a mod, so congratulations on your new your new responsibility. So Alex is apparently leaving the chat. I'm okay with that because, apparently pointing out historical facts from World War II automatically puts me on the other side of the war. And, I really don't care. I don't like either side, to be honest. I'm more of a true reactionary that doesn't like any of the seedlings from the Enlightenment that manifested into the competing systems of World War II, who's caused the most bloodshed in human history. I really don't care. I don't like either of you. I don't like any of you. So screw you all. Screw you all. That's going to go great for when I'm running for office. It's going to be great.
They're going to clip that out. Yeah.
Just vibing. Well, just vibing over here with my vape. We just vibing. I don't even remember what we were talking about. I got pissed off.
Okay, so we were talking about like what the dialectic is, the Hegelian dialectic, and you can also kind of look at like alchemical ideas as very similar. The union of the opposites. That's really similar to thesis, antithesis, synthesis. It's very similar, and in a continual process of like refinement and change.
Yeah. Well, I know that you just talked about, you kind of did just go over an application, especially with the LGBTQ stuff. But how else can we see this being played out in our society? Like, I guess between what Bertrand was kind of talking about and the Hegelian dialectic, what examples can we see in the context of now with this being played out?
Mass advertising. One of the things that like the alchemists did was they had like alchemical mandalas. So they would meditate on this symbolic image, and it would incorporate many different ideas into this thing. And they'd meditate on it, and they would think that that would help cause the change within them. Another way to think about that is like sigil magic. Right? The occultists would create a sigil, and the purpose of this is like subliminal advertising or subliminal messaging. They would create a sigil, either taking like, writing down whatever it was that they were trying, whatever spell they were trying to cast, and typically they were doing it on themselves. So if they wanted to create like a magical barrier around themselves, they would kind of write that out. They would take out like the vowels and the double letters, and so they would take those letters and then arrange them into a pictographic symbol. Sometimes they would incorporate actual pictures with this, so they had different ways of creating these sigils, and then they would like meditate on it and then try to immediately forget it. And they thought that once they did that, it would bypass the conscious and dualistic mind, as they would describe it, and go into the subconscious, and then could be activated or evoked. So they do this in advertising and logos and stuff. It's the same kind of thing. The purpose of it was to, I guess in a way, alter your state of consciousness. I would recommend, if people want to learn about how that works, to look at the book by Peter J. Carroll, the two books, Psychonaut and Liber Null. Obviously, these are occult books, and they're teaching the techniques, but what they describe as these methods of like changing your consciousness, going into an altered state of consciousness. And this is exactly what they're doing to us. It's the same thing. Meditation is part of it, visualization, all these different processes. And Carl Jung also, he did this too. He described, if you've read his like red book, he kind of documents sort of like his alchemical and occult processes or his works, and sort of the journey that he went on. And how this began was he was using visualization. He would go into his study at night, and he'd sit at his desk in the dark, and he would visualize himself going out into his backyard and just digging a hole, right? He did this every day for like 30 days. He talked about how he would try to, with his eyes closed, like imagine what it felt like walking on the floor, right? Opening the door, going outside, feeling the dirt under his feet, and like digging deep into the ground. And then eventually he had like this bizarre, I don't know what you want to call it, altered state of consciousness, where he felt like after 30 days of imagining the same thing, he begins to experience something where he digs down so far in his mind that he falls down into the ground, into this hidden cavern, and then he sees all these like snakes and stuff, and it's just a very bizarre experience that he describes. But it's this, you know, very similar to what what ritual magicians do. They come up with all kinds of like ritual and weird things to alter their state of consciousness to kind of, in my opinion, open it up for demonic activity.
Nice. Do you see this affecting our like people's politics at all?
Yeah, probably. I mean, if they're using this stuff on people and recommending very similar things, then yeah, I mean, I think that it is really demonic influence, and they're kind of trying to initiate everybody into their system of belief, right? Their antichrist ideology. That's my opinion. So yeah,
well,
I definitely think so.
I think they also subvert. I mean, we see a lot of subversion of Christian. Like they'll say, "Oh, it's okay to be Christian," right? Nobody's like the elites aren't saying don't be Christian. They're not even outlawing Christianity, but they are doing things like you can be Christian, but then as soon as you espouse Christian beliefs, you're kicked off. You're kicked off your platform. You maybe even fired. Like if you oppose gay marriage, you're you'll probably lose your job. Honestly, that's where we're at now. So how would you suggest kind of people who do care about being sober minded instead of mind controlled, how would you suggest that people kind of tap out of the matrix and into being able to how do you know where your convictions, how can you control your convictions?
Yeah, okay, so I would first encourage people to read about this stuff. That information is out there if you look for it and you find it. I mean, anybody can read about this stuff. Anyone can read the books of somebody like Elias Lethi and understand like what these occultists were doing and how they try to sell it to people. And the book that I just talked about, Psychonaut and Liber Null, that describes how they kind of trace their occultism back to like shamanism. And of course, they have different ways for changing, altering your state of consciousness. Some of it is like ritual dance, right? Like putting your physical body to the point of exhaustion, these like meditation practices, visualization, and some of these other things where they go through this process of trying to it's a death and rebirth, and their rebirth into occultism, and they talk about things like creating an astral body. And what they're really doing is just opening themselves up for demonic manipulation. So I would tell people not to get into that stuff. Don't try any of their rituals. Don't get involved in alchemy or any of like the inner alchemy. It's the same thing. I have in that article like the Azoth alchemy ritual that goes with that alchemical mandala that the alchemists would study, and they would have a lab process, a psychological internal process, and then they'd have a societal process for how to apply that. It's like 7 stages, coagulation, dissolution, fermentation. These are all these processes that they are applying in their social engineering. So I would just encourage people not to get involved in any of this crap like yoga or any of it. It's just not good. And I guess make sure that you are reading the Bible and studying scripture, and that's the best cure for it, because the word of God is like, it just kind of cuts through all of their garbage. It is truth. It's truth, manifested, I guess. You read it and it's like it has an effect on you. It really does. But it's the same thing with like these occult crap. You read that stuff and it does have an effect on you. It makes you more pliable, more suggestible. that's sort of the goal, right? With a lot of the entrainment in technology, with television and radio, that was the goal, was to soften people up for this stuff, you know. So just, I would say, maybe don't watch mainstream television. I'm sure nobody here watches like the news and stuff, but don't, the music industry, it's the same thing. Bertrand Russell talked about intoning you know, commands through sound and stuff, and using music to brainwash people. And these were scientific brainwashing techniques. You know, repetition, intoned sound. This is all the stuff that comes out of the music industry, and then, you know, the nasty things that these people are doing. So yeah, if you have children, don't let them watch things like the Disney Channel. You know, just stay away from all that, I guess. But educate yourself about it. Read about what these people were doing, because, you know, it's really disturbing to think like, okay, these are the same high priests of like the Egyptian priest class. It's the same people using the same things, the same ideas. They have technology now. They use some science, but there's a difference between real science and scientism. In like pseudoscience, things like critical race theory, that's obviously not real science, but there are real scientific techniques for brainwashing people, for breaking down their psyches and then rebuilding them in a different image. They do this to like military recruits. They have a process of psychologically breaking them, and then through basic training, and then they build them back up into the image that they want them to be in.
Yeah. Well, I think that process of breaking people down, I think they're doing that to Europeans.
Yeah.
I think that's pretty obvious, especially with the critical race theory. And then they're building you back up as a good little anarchist who also
anti-racist,
who washes the feet of Black people. So
yeah, literally worships, you know, minorities.
Yeah.
It's
for
really
the
weird.
society that you built, that your ancestors built. You are now bad, and you have to be sorry for building the West, and you have to wipe their boots and lick their toes. So
yeah, it's sad. I mean, you see what they're doing to kids too. Like I saw an article the other day. I think it was a school in Seattle had like 5-year-olds, like kids in kindergarten, holding up BLM signs and like talking about like Black separatism and stuff. And
that's crazy.
In this like self-hatred. It's bizarre, right? And it's just totally like, it's anti-God, because we are made in God's image, all of us. So to have this like self-hatred, it's really like hating God, because we're made in his image. So that's like what this is. That's what they're, you know, starting them at really young, is to get them to hate themselves, then to hate God, and to, you know.
Well, you know, I don't want to come across as a cucked boomer, but Steve King, Representative Steve King at AFPAC, he did bring up, he said that Western civilization, so these are white people, to be clear, Europeans, were the first society to ever build a distaste for slavery. So the entire, and to be frank, slavery has not been abolished in Africa or the Middle East. And so the only people who have ever abolished slavery, sorry, that's us. That's us.
Yeah.
And so for us, there's no zero reason for us to have guilt, because
no, it was a worldwide thing.
Yeah, and it still is. And the only people who have it outlawed is us. So
yeah, you know, look at Libya right now. You can buy a human for $400 at their open air slave markets.
Yeah. And somebody's bringing up Dr. Matthew Raphael Johnson in the chats. I would be interested in. He's on my list, but you know, there's only so many people I can, you know, get on. But let's see. I think we pretty much hit everything. Everything else is kind of just bonus for now. No No more super chats. Super chats low today, low on the super chats, but the free chats have been too insane for me to even keep up with.
Yeah.
Somebody's asking me, what is this? This is a glass. See, I went to AFPAC very last minute because Vincent James kind of gave me a little nudge to go. And because of what my announcement that I haven't made yet, that I've alluded to, kind of necessitated me attending. And because I'm gonna need their support. But I was going, it was a 15-hour drive. I went 24 hours with no sleep, and part of my strategy for not falling asleep was to smoke a lot of cigarettes and drink a lot of Red Bull. And so I've become re-addicted to nicotine. But I hate the smell of cigarettes, and so as I wean myself back off, I am using the vape. So yeah, that's what this is. It's a vape. So now I'm like Beardson Beardley, just sitting over here, we vibing.
Yeah, that's terrible. I mean, I'm so glad I quit smoking. Now I can't stand the smell of it. It's just like, ugh, you know.
Yeah, I don't like it
So
either.
you have to stop that again. You have to quit. Wean yourself from the vape. Throw it away. They may be worse than cigarettes because with the e-cigarettes, these vapes, you just can do it all day. You can just inside your house, just, you know. I mean, I used to go outside to smoke a cigarette, so at least, well, yeah, you wouldn't just be sitting there doing it all day, right? With an e-cigarette, and I switched to those to quit smoking cigarettes, and then I just realized that I was just sitting there like smoking this e-cigarette all day, probably more than I smoked regular cigarettes.
I'm usually pretty good about quitting though, so it's just, whatever.
You'll do it. You'll quit.
I will. Plus, at least you can like phase to the lower dosages, So
yeah,
there's that. But anyways, I think we covered quite a bit. Is there anything else you wanted to kind of get out there?
Yes, and no. I guess I would just encourage people, if they're interested, to read my first book on the evils of pride, which is, was perfect for me because I just feel like everybody struggles with that, right? Even writing it was probably an act of pride itself, to think that like I can even write about it. I mean, obviously everybody struggles with it, so I just want people to read it because I want like legitimate feedback on it, since it's the first time I tried to like write something longer like that. And you can just get it on my show page on my website. So if you go to patriotsoapbox.com, there's a pop-out menu that says shows. Click on shows. Mine's at the top, digging deeper. If you click on that, the PDF is linked there. You can just download it for free. And then you can read it and give me like feedback on it, because I usually hate everything I write after I publish it. So I'm hoping that, I think there's some good things in there, some good nuggets, but it was more like I guess like a trying to do self-examination, maybe, more than anything else. So there's that. Hi, Sunny Days. I see you out there in live chat. Good to see you. And I just kind of like, the way I wanted to close it, I wanted to read the C.S. Lewis quote, because I just love that about the scientific elite that we have right now. We're not yet at Bertrand Russell's scientific dictatorship, but everybody can see with COVID how we're moving more to medical tyranny. And they're going to keep pushing it. That's not going to stop. I saw a story the other day of a woman who had her children taken from her because she posted a picture on Facebook of her not wearing a mask, and she had a gun strapped to her hip. It was a open carry state, and I think she was leaving like a dentist's office, and she just took the picture and posted it. But her husband used this to to try to win custody of their children. And the judge she had, he called her like a COVID denier and all this, he was nasty. There's an audio video of like what he was saying. You can hear the contempt dripping from these people's mouths. They really, and so these are really who are the people in control of things, right? These judges, these upper management types, government officials, they're awful. And they think that they are doing good, but they are not. And I wanted to read the C.S. Lewis quote because I thought it was perfect. He says, "I live in the managerial age, in a world of admin. The greatest evil is not now done in those sordid dens of crime that Dickens loved to paint. It is not done even in concentration camps and labor camps. In those we see its final result, but it is conceived and ordered, moved, seconded, carried, and minuted, and clean, carpeted, warmed, and well-lighted offices by quiet men with white collars and cut fingernails and smooth-shaven cheeks who do not need to raise their voices. Hence, naturally enough, my symbol for hell is something like the bureaucracy of a police state or the office of a thoroughly nasty business concern." And so I think that kind of describes the mind of the technocrat perfectly, right? That describes the society that we live in, where the most horrible things are talked about and conceived in these government buildings, right? Where they come up with this crap. And then it leads to evil. It's horrible. The managers, right? Jeez.
Yeah, and I think I know I mentioned to you offline his book, That Hideous Strength, which is part of the space trilogy of his, I think encapsulates that statement that you just quoted, and it perfectly describes this. So if you haven't read it, everyone should go read That Hideous Strength. Obviously, maybe read the first two books first, but you can read it. You can read it by itself. It's a standalone story. But yeah, I did want to say before we go, I know you mentioned tones and the use of intonation. Well, we have a pretty powerful, as Orthodox, I know that you're Orthodox, I'm Orthodox Christian as well. We have a pretty powerful response to that as well. I think go to liturgy, go to Vespers, you'll hear the tones of the church. We use an intonation as well. Quite a bit. I know if
and
you
it's
read
healing though, certain frequencies
are
like healing. And I think that liturgy definitely is.
Yeah, and
then there's the opposite of that.
Yeah, I intone my prayers usually too. So obviously the biggest way for us as Orthodox Christians to counter all of this insanity is one, go to church, which is one reason why they tried to keep us from church, right? COVID was a good excuse for them to stop that. So go to church, go to liturgy, pray, do your prayer rule, and read the scriptures. And I would add the church fathers. Add some of that, so because you'll get some very not politically correct takes from the Orthodox Church fathers.
That's true.
And just remember, though they may not be politically correct, they are correct. So we'll leave it at that, since this episode's already demonetized. We're not trying to get kicked off, but they might, for whatever reason, the church fathers, they were already talking about international bankers, and it's amazing. Yeah. They had the foresight.
Yeah.
They really foresight.
Did. Yeah, so. And they're so right about the way that you kind of counteract this is, really like the way that you take care of yourself, working on yourself, looking at your own problems, your own sins, your own shortcomings and weaknesses, and struggling against that and trying to be a virtuous person and trying to live as Christ lived. If everybody did that, obviously things would be a lot better.
Yeah, and obviously find community. I know we look for community in all the wrong places, but your church is probably the best place to foster a community and to build that as well. So community is also important, which is also a target for destruction as well. So the family unit, your religious communities, these are all the elites know that they have to destroy this to fully implement Bertrand's vision, right?
Mhm.
So, or is that his name?
Yeah, Bertrand Russell.
Yeah. Well, I have an author that I admire called Bertrand de Juvenal, so I get him like, wait, did I mix that up? But yeah, that's all I have to say about it. What platform is? I know that you were on DLive. Is DLive still the main place, or are you on another?
Yeah, we've been demonetized on DLive, but we're still there. It's dlive.tv/PSB. We're on what else? Vaughn, VAUGHN. I think it's just Vaughn.live/PSB. We're on the Foxhole, which is an app. You can, there's a bunch it's foxhole.app. You'll see a bunch of channels up there. We're usually at the top because we're live all the time. So yeah, you can find us there. And you can just go to our website, patriotsoapbox.com. All one word, so there's like 2 S's in there. Patriot Soap Box. The 2 S's kind of throws people off sometimes. I might want to change that to just like psb.com because it's just so much easier. So, but yeah, that's where you can find us, and we're there all the time, so you can never stop listening. You just listen all day. But we have a good live chat too. We all kind of talk to each other and hang out. We have an Element server, where people can kind of communicate. It's, it is what it is. It's certainly not Discord. We're not allowed to be on Discord anymore, so there's that.
Yeah. I came on your show once, and I remember performing better than I thought I would. I was like, I don't even remember what I talked about. I just remember being straight fire. I remember spitting fire out. I was like, God, that was good. That was good.
I don't remember really what you talked about either.
And it wasn't even, all I remember is I made a bunch of notes, and then I didn't talk about anything that I made notes for. So
yeah, I probably just talked a lot anyways during that. I'm pretty sure that's what happened.
It's all good. I don't even remember what it was about, but whatever. Anyways, I appreciate it. Stick around. I want to share some state secrets with you. And but for the rest of you, thank you for watching. I'll be back next week. Not sure who. I have a guest. I just can't remember who because I'm on my peak game right now. I've had 2 cups of coffee and I still can't. Whatever. I can't think. My brain is not working. So see you guys next week.